Hi, hi, beautiful filmmakers. How are you today? It is Monday, so I'm here for Filmmaker to Filmmaker. I hope you guys are having a great start to your week. Hello, somebody's here already. How are you? And that you're going to have a great week. The kids have got spring break this week if you're in America, or some do, I guess. My kid does. So hopefully we won't be interrupted, but you just never know your luck. Yay for spring break, really. And I guess it's also Cesar Chavez Day, so it's just a day when, most people are on holiday. But not here. I'm here with you guys. I'm so happy. So I just wanted to say hi, and today in Filmmaker to Filmmaker, what I wanted to do was something that I did last week, which is not actually answer a question, but just talk about something that I think can be very helpful for filmmakers. I do have a few questions that have been loading up, so I will get to those in the coming weeks. But right now, I just wanted to talk about something that's just on my mind, which is about how we respond to criticism and how to deal with criticism as screenwriters and as filmmakers. And dealing with criticism, is one of those things that can make or break you, actually, I think, as a filmmaker and a screenwriter, because I think initially it can be very difficult to receive criticism. It can really hurt us a lot. And if we learn how to deal with it in the right way, though, it can be a very positive thing, so that even if people have negative things to say about our screenplays or about our films, we can actually grow from it. We don't have to take it personally, but we can use it as a tool to become better at what we do, and who doesn't want to do that? So the first thing that I want to talk about, and there's basically 3 stages at which you receive criticism for your work as a screenwriter and or filmmaker. Hey there, hey youngster, I love that. Not feeling that young, but there you go. So there's 3 basic stages where you will receive feedback or criticism as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker. The first stage is when you finish a script, okay? And I strongly recommend that you only ever share a script when you are actually really ready to share it. Don't do it too early. Hi, Mary. I've got family dropping in. Hello. I'm great. How are you guys? So I really recommend that you do not share your script until you're really ready to share it. And I say this for a few reasons. I often think it's a big mistake to share. Although sometimes we get really excited when we start to write a script. We want to talk about it. We want to tell people about it. It's often a bad idea. And I just go, it's kind of like, when you have a baby, the baby starts in your belly and it needs to be in this dark, quiet place to grow. It needs all the strength, right? And it's the same with little plants, seed underground. Things start in the dark and in the quiet. And I think it's the same for when you are going to write a script or make a film, that it starts in the dark and in the quiet, and it's not about being public with it, and it's not talking to everybody about it. Because I feel like if you talk about it to everybody when it's really just beginning to germinate, you will hurt it, Let it just stay in your mind and keep the energy in for you. Hey, Tully, how are you? So, I really strongly recommend not sharing your script at all until you have a draft that you want to share. And that's like a first draft. And as I say, that can be challenging for some of us because we want to talk about it very early on. But I would urge you not to do it. Keep the energy for actually creating your script. Don't put your energy out and tell it to people before you're ready, okay? Once you have a script and you're ready to share it with people, be very selective about who you share it with. Right? This is your script. This is your baby. Don't entrust it to just anybody. I think that's really important. You don't have to give it to everybody who asks to read it. It's yours, right? And just like your child, you wouldn't leave your child with anybody. You check who the babysitter is, right? You check their credentials before you give them over, right? You do not just give your script to anybody, okay? And especially when you're still working on it and you're still gaining confidence with it and still finding it, it's still a work in progress. So I go be very selective about who you give it to. And initially that is a bit of a trial and error thing. After a while you will get to know, you'll have certain people that you give your scripts to, right? If you're starting out, you don't have those people yet, you're going to cultivate them. And so, it's a little bit of trial and error. Sometimes you'll give it to somebody and you'll realize pretty soon that was a mistake, because they'll be really horrible about it and they won't be constructive or helpful. And I just say, not all feedback is useful, right? So, when you get into that process of getting feedback, it's not all helpful. Some of it will just confuse you. Some of it will take you, into a darker place. Talia is saying, literally keep a list of people who are helpful when they read your stuff. Yes. And people who, for whatever reason, make you feel bad or small when they read you. Absolutely. And just be clear. And if somebody really responds super negative to your work, for some reason, never give them your work again. Like, there's no reason to, you know, like, make sure you, like, you choose the people who, like, are helpful. Now, say, initially it can be a little bit you don't know until you try, but once you have an experience, then you know. Now, unless the person is actually, you know, paying you to write the script, and if they are, then it's slightly, you're in a different situation, right? If they have paid for you to write the script and now you have to go and take their feedback, you're in a different situation than if it's your baby and you've asked them to read it and you're getting feedback. So unless they are paying you, you get to choose, like, what you listen to and what you don't, right? You can just, like, ignore everything they say if you totally disagree with them, you know? And I would always say, like, do it politely, because I go, if someone's taking the time to read your script, that's great, and it's really kind of them. And I just always go, when you're going to meet someone or you're going to talk to them on the phone or whatever, you know, it's just like getting yourself into a clear space before you receive their notes, and making sure that you're clear in yourself that this is not about you, this is about your work, right? And they're two different things. And that you're grateful to this person for reading the script, and you're grateful to hear what they have to say, even if it's hard for you to hear some of it, you know? But just getting yourself into a positive space is really good. And getting clear about what kind of criticism you're looking for, you know, because I think you should play a very active part in guiding, you know, what you get from them, because you should be clear about kind of what would be helpful to you, right? And sometimes, I mean, for me, there's a certain questions that I always ask. One of them is it, you know, where were you bored? That's really important to me, because I just go, like, people should never be bored reading my script, right? They can be, you know, all different things, but they should never be bored. And the other thing I always want to make sure is that they believed it all, and they believe the characters. So that's always worth checking into. Did they just, like, believe the world, and was it a world that they engaged with in that sense? But beyond that, I just sort of go, like, you know, you guide that conversation and you listen to it. Now, how do you know if criticism is good and if you should act on it? Like, my basic like weather vane for this is trust your gut, right? Trust your instincts. And it's interesting that, Tully, you said that thing, you know, for people, like, some people make you feel bad or small. And I think that's exactly it. Like, I go, if you walk away from a conversation about your script and you feel clearer, you feel more obvious, it's more obvious to you what you need to do next, right? You feel excited, you feel inspired, right? You're like, I've got to do this, right? Like, when you hear certain people, like, they'll say certain things and you just go, boom, you know, it's like light bulb goes off, right? It's fantastic, right? And that's, like, great criticism. If you walk away from that conversation, though, that meeting or whatever, you know, maybe it was on the phone, maybe it was in person, and you feel confused, you feel depressed, right? You feel like, oh my God, it's never going to be any good. You know, you feel like this, like, heaviness, and it's really like you're feeling. If you feel that, I would urge you just to ignore the whole conversation, okay? And I mean it, just go, okay, just chalk it down to a bad experience, never give that person your work again, and also just go, that person, like, just doesn't get what I'm doing, you know? Like, if it doesn't help you get clearer, it's like, I just go, put it aside. If it doesn't serve you, put it aside. You know, why not? You get to choose what you take on and which you don't, you know? And just go, if it's not helpful, don't let it help you. You know, don't let it hinder you. There's a saying that a friend introduced me to, Ross Clark, some years ago. He said, when it comes to taking criticism, if 10 Russians tell you you're drunk, you're drunk. I love it. And I think this is a really interesting thing. This is the idea, though, that if you keep getting certain, like, and this is the importance of giving it to more than one person, like, if 5 people come to you and say, you know, I just didn't really believe that your character would do this, right? And now you defended it the first time, you're like, you just don't get it, you know? You defend it the second time, you're like, you know, by the way, you don't actually defend it, because when you're receiving the criticism of the person, you just smile and say thank you and take notes, and in your mind you might be going, what nonsense, but you would never say that to them. Don't ever do that. It's not good energy. It's not good with the person who's read your script. Don't fight with them. Don't argue. Don't try to convince them. Just take it, okay? And do what you want with it. But if 5 people give you the same bit of criticism, if they're all like, I just didn't believe this, and at first you're resistant to it and you think, well, they don't get it, but all of them feel the same way, then I think you have to accept that there is some issue there, you know, and it is worth looking at, even if, like, you're really, really resistant. And this has definitely come up for me with every script that I've written. There's definitely, like, some things that I think are so obvious somehow, and then I learn for everybody it's just something that's not clear, or that they don't get, or they don't believe, or they don't understand, and I'm like, okay, I need to fix it. Because I guarantee you, you're so much better to fix it at this stage at script stage rather than waiting until you actually have a film, right? These things don't get better. They don't get better by filming your film, you know? If there's a problem with the script, it's going to be a problem. And it's so much better to fix it now. I speak like really from experience with this because in my first film, there's like one scene that I just hate, you know, and I hated it as on the script. And somehow I thought like we would get away with it, or I thought the actors would make it better, or that we would sell it. I always knew the script, this one scene was below standard. I always knew it wasn't good. And I somehow just went, oh, well, it'll be fine and I can get away with it. You can't get away with it. Don't do it, because it won't go away. And then you'll sit in the editing room kicking yourself. And then you'll sit later watching it with people kicking yourself. And you're just like, why didn't I deal with it when it was a script, you know? Just if there's a problem with the script, deal with it now. Talia said, it may not be the exact problem the way they all phrased it, though. There is a problem, but usually it's actually several scenes before the part where they fell off. So even then, trust your instinct. Yes. I mean, I would say 100% with everything, trust your instinct. It's your baby. Like, you know, it's that thing like they say about children, like only you know your child. Like, you know your child. You know if something's wrong with them, you know? You know if something's up, and you know if they're fine, right? You know. And it's totally true with your scripts and with your film babies. Like, you know, and you have to trust your instinct, and that is how you will make a good film, and that is how you'll make good stuff. So it's the same, what we're talking about with the script feedback is the exact same when you get into edit feedback. So once you've done a rough cut of your film and you get to the point where you want to share it, and as I say, in either case, I would never share anything until you're at the point where you really feel like you've done the best that you can, and maybe you still have some questions about it. You're not like, you still feel like there might be room for improvement, but you just don't know what that might be, and that's the time at which you open yourself up for feedback, you know? And it can be really, really helpful. When you get to like cut a movie, so you've got your cut and you want to get feedback on a cut, it's the exact same as when you're sharing your script. It's just the same thing, you know? Get yourself into that detached position with it, you know, to receive the feedback. I find when you should show a film to people, like the best thing is to be in the room with them when they're watching it. Because honestly, like I don't need to even talk to them afterwards. Like I already know just by sitting in a room with them exactly what I need to do. You can tell if you're sitting in a room watching a movie with people, you can tell when you have totally lost them, you know, when they are just like, when they're bored, when they're, you know, you can tell. You can also tell when they are totally engaged. You can tell for yourself too, like I'm always interested in the internal monologue that's going on in my head as I'm watching in the movie with people. Because although I've watched it usually by that time 100 times or something in the editing room, yeah, it can be very uncomfortable. You know, like even though I've watched it 100 times in the editing room, suddenly watching it with an audience, like I'll find myself thinking this, like literally in my brain, I'm going, if we can just get through this scene, I know that they'll love the next scene. And I'm like, okay, there's a problem with this scene, you know? And it's like, it's hard, some of it. But again, it's such a privilege because it's much better to do it at that stage than later, you know, because later you will watch it with people. Like, you know, if your film goes on to play in festivals or whatever, you will sit and see your film many times with festival audiences. With my film Obsoletia, I mean, I probably watched it like at least 15 screenings. I sat through the whole movie, you know, just to have that experience with audiences and, you know, figure out like what was going on. It's so interesting, and every audience is different. And I would say like even if you like you think audiences are really into it, sometimes like they're laughing at the right places and they're responding, then they don't seem that into it at the end. And then some audiences don't seem that into it during the process, and then afterwards they loved it. You just never know. But I think like when you get to the stage of doing a rough cut, it's the same thing. Like my thing is like, obviously at a certain point in this whole process, at every point, what you're doing is you're saying, I believe in this, right? At a certain point, you're not going to make everybody happy, you know, and everybody's going to have their own reactions to stuff. And there's not really many films in the whole world that please everybody, right? And I don't think that's your aim as an artist anyway. I don't think your aim is to make something that makes everybody happy, you know? Your aim, you know, well, our aims are all different, I guess, you know? Figure out what your aim is, stick to it though. But I think there's a very important thing about playing to your audience. And I certainly had the experience with my second film. We did a lot of test screenings. The producers would run the conversations afterwards. They felt very strongly that I shouldn't be part of the conversation with the audience, which I found very strange. They felt that people in the audience wouldn't be, in the test screenings, wouldn't be honest if they thought I was there. I found it really bizarre. So I just got to sit up in the back and listen to the criticism, but not actually talk or be a part of the conversation. That was uncomfortable. And I found that really bizarre, because I was just like, in my experience with my other films where I have ran the conversation, I don't think people are less honest because, you're the writer director and you're standing in front of them. I think they're still, eager to share their honest opinions. I don't think they sugarcoat it for you anyway, because again, you create the atmosphere. So for me, when I'm doing, when I show these films like in that state, I'll say to the people who are there, it really doesn't serve me if you don't tell me the truth. There are marvelous things about this film, and and I'm really proud of it, and you don't need to tell me all the good things about it. What will really help me is if you tell me honestly the things that aren't working for you, because that's how I'll make it better. I won't make it better if you just focus totally on the positives. And I create that situation, I say, and it's totally good, and I just want to make my film better. So any notes that you have, and and I guide the conversation, and I ask them a lot of questions, and I really try to, for myself, see it from their perspective so that I can make the film better. And it is, I think, that process, because just what we're saying, you can't see your own movie after a certain point. You've watched the cut so many times. It's really difficult to be objective. So actually having an audience is so important. And I feel like the audience, you should make sure you get a sort of broad range of people to watch your movie at that point. Definitely make sure at least some of them are the ideal target audience, So if you've made a horror film, make sure some of them are horror fans. It's no point just showing them to people who would never pay to see your movie. If you're doing a comedy, make sure it's people who would, want to see that kind of comedy. And there can be other kinds of people too. It's not that you should only have them. It can be also interesting to actually just do a little bit of a test, to sort of go, try different ages, try and have different kinds of people watching your movie, and see how different kinds of people respond. Because the audience for it might be different than you think than you imagine. You might think you've got a movie that's for 30, people in their 30s, and then you might find that it's people in their 60s who are just freaking out over it, who knows? So try to get different kinds of people. Tully has said it would be weird to talk to the filmmaker if it was done, but if you're open with them about how you're still working on it, then of course it's better for them to talk to you directly. Exactly, and that's the thing about, a work in progress, when you're showing, a rough cut for feedback. I think, to me it just makes, it's a no-brainer to have the director, in the room asking the questions. They're the one that's making the film. And I don't think it's weird to talk to them, because you're helping them, and you're respectful and thoughtful, and and that's the thing about, actually, we're talking right now about receiving criticism and feedback, but a big part of being a filmmaker, I feel like, is learning to give it too, because you'll be asked to give it, both for people's screenplays and on rough cuts of other people's films. And cultivating that skill in yourself is really important, where you learn how to assess films from an objective point of view, that it's not about just your opinion. It's not me just going, I didn't really like that, but actually really going, okay, what is this filmmaker trying to do? How could they do it better? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are, and being very constructive and thoughtful in your responses to somebody. I think it's super important. Now, after these are the two main points at which you'll open up for feedback, right? Where you want people to give you feedback, and it's so helpful and so important to your process to get notes from people and to get feedback when you finish your script, and then when you're sort of finishing your film, right? And then after you actually finish your movie, completely finish it, yeah, we should give feedback on people's feedback, totally. It was crap feedback. After that, you release your movie into the world. And then you get a sort of unsolicited feedback, And I have to say, I like to talk about this because I think it's important, and so few people do talk about it. And I think then you're not prepared for it as a filmmaker. And it's really important to prepare for it, I think, because I was totally unprepared for it. I did not prepare for receiving feedback on my movie, and it sounds rather naive, but I made my first film in such a bubble. I first of all, I didn't really think about people watching it at all, which is kind of strange. And when it got into Sundance, I thought, okay, this is going to be amazing and wonderful. And it went to Sundance and it played. And the first day, the premiere was horrifying to me. Is the only way I can say it. Like I was in so much pain because I was just so nervous and just seeing all these people and like actually watching the movie and just feeling so like, just a big ball of nerves. And afterwards, the next day, basically, so after the movie, we went back, a bunch of us, all my cast and crew were there. We just had a little party in our house and got drunk and I went to bed. And the next day I got up and I immediately Googled the name of my movie, and there it was the first review, and it said Obsolidia, which is the name of my movie, a compendium of indie cliches. And it's like tattooed on my heart, and like I was just like I was just devastated, and this review was so mean. It wasn't sort of like, it wasn't constructive, it was just mean. It was that sort of thing, like, oh, if anyone ever talked to me the way these characters talk, I'd punch them in the face. And this film made by one Diane Bell, I'll never forget that. I don't know why that bugged me so much that this reviewer called me one Diane Bell. I just like, the whole thing was just a hatchet job, and it was devastating and it was shocking, because I felt like I'd made like, this movie was just totally from my heart, and I never made any pretensions that I was making the best movie in the world. I was just making something that I loved. And yeah, and and it was like so vicious, it was like vicious. It did feel personal, and I was kind of like, oh my God. And for a minute I was like, I said to my husband, I think I just want to leave. Like, I just want to go home, because I was like, suddenly this whole pressure of like, you feel like you're in a popularity contest, and you also just feel like, you make your film from a very pure place, and people just want to judge it. And I get it. Like, that's how we are as audiences often. It's like, come on, entertain me. I'm sitting here with my popcorn, give it to me, right? And, it's just quite shocking. You've spent, the last year and a half of your life having this magical experience, making this movie, and just with very pure, humble intentions. And I don't know, it's weird, right? You sort of feel like it's your kid, and it's, again, I think of our films as our babies, and I'm like, it's your kid, and they're like tap dancing on the stage, and they're not the best tap dancer at all, but all these people are judging them, and it's just like, you just feel icky about it. It's like, oh. So I said to my husband, I was like, I think I just want to leave. And he was like, well, see how you feel later today, you should go to the director's brunch and just hang out and see. So I went to the director's brunch. And this is in Sundance, and so it was just like the directors of movies go, like Robert Redford hosts this lunch out at the Sundance Resort. So you get on a bus. It was kind of amazing, like, because you get on the bus and you feel like you're on the school trip or something, going up into the mountains with all these amazing directors. And when we got there, I started talking to two of them who had movies in my category, and it was Mark Ruffalo and Derek Cianfrance. And Derek did the movie Blue Valentine that year. And Mark was there with his directorial debut. I don't think he's directed another film. It's called Sympathy for Delicious. And I thought it was a great film, very underrated movie. Lovely film. Mark is just a lovely man. And they said to me, Diane, what movie did you do? And I said, I did Obsolidia. It's a compendium of indie cliches. And they went, what? You read the critics? Are you crazy? You don't read the fucking critics. It was so funny. I was like, what? I didn't know. Like, I thought you would read them, And I would just like say, over the years, what I've learned, there's a couple of things. There are some great critics out there who really will help you grow as a filmmaker. And if you're so lucky to be reviewed by them, you will be grateful, because even if they don't love your film, they will help you grow as a filmmaker, because they respect filmmaking, they respect what you've done, they understand it, they seek to understand it, they're educated about films, right? And they're not just there to try and score points of being clever by throwing crap at you, Now, those critics tend not to review films very quickly, i.e. they don't walk out a movie and then write the review so it's up the next day. So the first reviews are typically, I think, the worst, and I don't just mean the worst in the sense of they're bad reviews. It might be a great review that comes out the day after your movie is premiered, but they tend to be the ones like of the critics who don't even like digest the meal before they decide. Yeah. Well, totally. Don't give them power. That's how I just said the critics must hate it. We can just not even read them. Exactly. But you don't have to. You don't have to read them. And I sort of decided then at Sundance, I was like, I'm not going to read the critics. I'm just going to listen to Mark Ruffalo, and I am not going to read the critics. And I just didn't after that point. I thought, I'm here at Sundance. Like, why am I thinking of going home? I'm here with a movie, right? Like, this is the dream, and I'm just going to freaking enjoy it. And, and I think it's really important, for you, just, just to be aware, like when you are gonna like launch something into the world, the haters are gonna hate, right? There are gonna be people who hate your work, right? And you'll be shocked. You'll be shocked at how much they hate it and how much they will enjoy knocking it down. And in this day and age of the internet, anyone who spent 3 minutes on Twitter knows what I'm talking about, or on Facebook or on any of these platforms. People just like to be snarky and mean and rude. I don't understand it, right? Once you've made a film, you'll never be that rude about another person's movie, ever, because you know what goes into it. It's not easy, and especially with these small movies, I would never be mean about a small movie like Office Lydia. Even if it's not my taste, then I just go, it's not for me, I don't need to throw shit at it, because it's like, it's somebody's baby, they worked hard for it, it might not be perfect, but it's okay, I don't need to throw shit at it. And I think with the critics, there's some, as I say, that are really great. There's a lot of bloggers now, though, who, like, I don't know, they think they're being clever. They're not. I think there's always been this problem, though. Ingmar Bergman very famously punched a critic once. I totally understand that. I totally understand why you would just punch a critic at times. It's terrible, isn't it? But I had that feeling about that critic for a while. But, the thing is, you don't have to read them. You don't have to engage. And you can choose. And you get to choose what is helpful. So I should be super rude until my short comes out to get out of my system while I can. Yes, and then you just know, well, you can be rude all your life if you can be rude about other people's films. If you're not pissing someone off, you're probably not doing anything important. True. I think what you do realize is that, like, actually getting people to review your film, you've already won. Like, you're doing something right? Because you're on that platform. And, like, there are many filmmakers who would just be do anything to actually just get a review. So if you're getting bad reviews, at least you're getting reviewed. But it can still be hurtful. I'm not going to hide it from you. Like, I was really, it hurt to read a review like that, because it's just shocking. It's shocking that someone can so misunderstand or so misconstrue what you're about, in a sense, and people do get personal and rude. I actually saw my first 1-star review for my book the other day on Amazon, and I had the same reaction where I was like, what? And I immediately sort of I felt defensive, and I was like, okay, wait, just unplug, it's fine, This person has completely misunderstood the book, completely misunderstood what I'm saying, but that's their business, right? I don't have to. The thing you realize is you don't have to make everybody love your work, and not everybody is going to love your work. And my thing, actually, when it goes back to the test screenings of your film, is, okay, some people will hate your movie. Some people will be kind of on the fence about it. Some people will like it, and some people will love it, right? Now, my goal in the test screenings is to sort of figure out people who like it. How do we get those people to love it, right? How do we bump them up one? The people who hate it, right? I don't care about them. It's not for them. It's finding the people, it's figuring out who are the people that like the movie and how would you make them love it. And that's the criticism that's helpful. People who like it but are not yet loving it. And I think when you hone in on those people and listen to what they're saying, that's what's going to help you get to the next level with your movie. But the people who hate it are just not going to be your audience. Nothing is going to make them love your movie. And I see this for myself as an audience member. I just watched a bunch of short films, and actually read a bunch of scripts for a couple of different juries that I was on. And it's that thing, some things are just not your thing, and there's nothing that would make me love certain things, and other things, I like them, and I go, oh, if they just did that and that could really take it to the next level, so focus on that. I'm going to wrap it up in a minute, but there's a couple last things I want to say. One was, a friend of mine once met Quincy Jones, and she said that Quincy said to her, she is a filmmaker, Quincy said to her, this is the biggest advice I can give you as an artist, play to your audience, right? And I thought it's so interesting because I feel like so much of the advice we get is all about, how do we widen our audience? How do we appeal to more people? How do we get more people, expand our audience or something? And I thought that is so interesting. It's know what your niche is and play to them. And that means just double down on what you love. And this goes throughout the whole process of creating something. Don't worry about trying to appeal to everybody, because you'll never do it, and you'll make yourself miserable, and you'll end up with mediocre crap, But when you just but when you, the comment, just got to keep giving the haters something to do. That's right. But when you just focus in on what you love, and you keep giving what you love, you know, and you have the courage to like just protect that and you know, and let that blossom, that's when you'll make great work. And I always have this thing, like every year there's movies that just prove that to me, that just on paper seem like they would never do well, you know. Moonlight being one of those movies, you know, just like on paper, like that had no right to end up winning Best Picture, you know. And look at it, right? And it's just a stunning piece of work because it's just love. The question has come up, how do you find the balance between playing to the audience and staying true to the story that comes from the heart? I think that it's the same thing. I think when you, and because the key here is playing to your audience and not to the general audience, right? The first audience is your own heart to me. So if you're staying true to that, you know, and really like put all your passion into that, it's going to appeal to certain people, and it's not trying to water it down so it appeals to more of them. Does that make sense? So I don't think there's a conflict between like, you know, satisfying your own heart and satisfying the audience. I think your heart is totally like, if you're authentic to your heart, it will be aligned to a specific group of people. You know, like, I mean, Quincy Jones was probably never trying to play to a heavy metal crowd. You know, he's not trying to win over people who are not going to love his music, right? He just plays to people who love his music. He plays what he loves. And I think that's the thing for you. If you played it, you know, if you satisfy yourself first and you love your movie, I always think that there's going to be an audience for it. There's going to be other people who love it. Talia said, nobody is so weird that they won't have an audience who loves the same things they love. Exactly. It's just a matter of finding them. I agree. And I think, you know, like, it's that thing, your strength as an artist is by being really specific. I really do feel that. You know, I don't think we do ourselves a service when we try to appeal to more people. You know, I think when we try to appeal to more people, that we often water down what is unique and what is going to be amazing about the film. Yeah, and it just dilutes it. Rather than like really just having the bravery to like totally go with the heart. Yes, that makes sense. Play to your heart and trust the audience is there. I really do believe that. I think I just have this thing, if you love your movie, like if you genuinely are just like, you know, it's as authentic as it can be from you, I'm sure there are other people who will love it too. I am absolutely sure. And there might not be tens of millions or hundreds of millions, but this is why we make indie films, you know? Like, if you're making a movie and it's going to cost $100 million to make it, then you need a huge audience to monetize it, you know? But if you're making a movie for a couple $100,000, you don't need it. You know, you don't need 100 million people to love it. I think this goes into that thing about the 1,000 true fans or something. And I think that's true for filmmakers, you know? Like, if you can cultivate a particular audience, and you do that by giving them something that they're not getting elsewhere, right? I also have this thing, I just think movies generally, the more heart-driven they are, the more they are specific, the better they are every time. And that means taking risks, you know? But every year I just see those films that break out, that are those movies that are so specific, you know? They're not generic. You know, when I meet screenwriters who are kind of like, oh, well, I didn't really want to tie it down, you know? So I just left it as like, it's Every Town USA, or it's this, or it's that. And I always think it's just a mistake, because the more specific we are, the more weirdly universal it is. It's kind of like the great paradox of what we do. And some of my favorite films, like one of my favorite movies ever is Tokyo Story. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's you know, it's a movie from the 50s in Japan, and it's so Japanese and it's so off its time, and yet it's so completely universal. And I don't know anyone who watches it and doesn't see something of their family in it, which is crazy, you know, because it's so culturally specific and time specific. So I think completely you satisfy yourself, and then other people will get it. The more you zoom in on something, the closer to truth you get, and truth has a way of being applicable to other things. Totally. You know, and the more that you just you make something that you love, because at the end of the day, you don't control other people's thoughts or feelings about your work, right? People will read things into it that you never intended, for good and bad, right? People will respond to it in all different ways. Like, everybody, you have no control over it. None. Zero. You know? What you do have control over is like what you create and the intention of that creation. And I guarantee you, like, if a movie fails, like if you make a movie and it basically fails to find an audience, if you made the movie that you loved, it won't hurt as much as if you made a movie that you didn't love. Okay, if you make a movie that you don't love, that you're doing it because you put things in it that you're not really sure about, but you do it because that's what you're told you should do, or that's what you think will sell, or whatever, and then the movie doesn't do that well, you're gonna feel horrible. But if you've made a movie you love and it doesn't find an audience, I don't know, you feel okay about it. And I've done it. It's my third film, I think. I love the movie. We haven't released it yet. Yes, you gotta enjoy it day to day. And I just think, you have to love it. If you don't love it, how could anybody else? And it might be a difficult child, and I keep using the analogy of films as babies, but I really do think the films are children, and it might, some films are just like your prodigy. Hey, Tomica's here. Some films are like, your perfect child, and most aren't, right? Like, children are not perfect, right? They are not who you want them to be half the time, and I think your films are like that too. You have the best intentions for them, you have all the vision for them, and somehow they turn out differently. They have their own life. They have their own way of being in the world. You give birth to them, but then they have their own thing. And you just have to give them all the love, though. If you're unable to love them, then, as I say, how can you expect anyone else to? Or how can you expect them to just stand up and be happy in the world? Okay, so that is it for today. There was one thing I wanted to read just to close this out. Just talking about receiving criticism. Now, I actually put this quote into my book, which is Shoot from the Heart. Some of you have read this, so I'm just going to read a little thing from this. This is a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, the president. And actually, this was given to me by a fellow filmmaker who had a movie at Sundance when my film Obsolete was there. This is Ryan. I'm having a blank on his surname. He did the Dry Land, and he is married to America Ferrara. America was in that movie, and actually we met up in Edinburgh Film Festival, and we were talking about critics and criticisms, and he wrote this out for me and gave it to me, and I just went, okay, every filmmaker in the world needs to write this out and pin this on their wall. And it's quite a famous quote, but I'm going to share it anyway because I do think it's great. So this is from Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I think that's just great. And I think this is it takes enormous courage to make movies. It takes enormous courage to write, because by writing or by making a movie, what you're doing is saying my voice matters. And for a lot of us, that is not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to believe. It's not an easy thing to step into. And I know for myself, that was a big struggle for a long time. And then receiving criticism was initially tough. But that is what you need to remember. Even if your film doesn't work out as you want, even if your script is not where you want it to be, you are doing it, and that is everything. It really is. Yes, amen to that. And so keep on keeping on, and let the critics, they'll never know, they don't do it. They don't take those risks, because it takes a lot of heart and a lot of courage to create anything. So good luck with it. I hope this has been helpful, and it's been fun to see so many friendly faces here today. I hope you guys have an amazing day and an amazing week, and love you lots. Bye.